Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a Parashat Shlach Lecha. I want to share with you just two short insights today, which I really think resonate so deep and something we can learn from and apply in our lives. In this week's Parashat Shlach Lecha, when the Jewish people dispatched 12 of their greatest leaders to the land of Israel to hopefully come back with good positive reports about how to attack and conquer the land, instead they come back with negative reports. Many years ago I read one of the great commentaries that explained, actually what was taking place over here is that these 12 leaders understood that something fundamental and dramatic was about to take place once they crossed over the threshold of the land of Israel, namely that their great leader Moshe Rabbeinu would die. He was not allowed to go in. And they couldn't understand what a life with Moshe not being the leader would look like. And therefore they came up with this whole guise to be able to remain in the desert with their teacher Moshe in order to ensure that Moshe should live longer. What an incredible way to look at a terrible, tragic story. And what I read this morning resonates with the same idea. After they begin to cry and lament about the fact that they can't go in, the Jewish people turn round to the spies and they say something which is bizarre. And Moshe and Aaron's listening to them and they say, Halot tov lanu, it would have been better had we gone back to the land of Egypt. What does that mean? This is a place that for 210 years had enslaved them in body and soul. This was a place where they should have been there for 400 years, but Hashem took them out after 210 years. Why would they want to go back? The sages give three reasons as to why they came out early. Number one, because the suffering that they endured in the land of Egypt in 210 years equated to 400 years. Number two, the count of 400 years did not begin from when they entered the land of Egypt. It actually began from the birth of Yitzchak. And number three, we know very clearly that the Jews were on such a low level when they left that had they stayed there any longer, they would have completely lost their spiritual Jewish identity. When Abraham, thousands of years ago, was promised by Hashem, Ki ger yezarcha be'eretz lo lahem, va'avadum ve'inu otam 400 shana. Hashem told him, you know what, your people, your descendants will go into the land of Israel, in Egypt for 400 years, and there what will happen is they will be enslaved. The purpose of that was completely removed to a certain extent when they came out early. Says the Maharal, had they been there for 400 years, the purpose, and that's a whole other discussion, of being in Egypt, the tikkunim, the rectification spiritually, especially when the Jewish people were in the embryonic stage, would have been rectified and there would never have been another Jewish exile. That is deep and profound. And it was with this recognition that the Jewish people turned round, understanding that the Jewish people in the future were going to have to suffer hundreds of thousands of years of exile. Halot tov lanu, it would have been better, let's go back to Egypt now, because maybe we'll be able to fix the original tikkun, the original rectification of why we should have been there. And maybe Jews in the future will not have to suffer. The Maharal of Prague says this, and it's such a positive way, a positive spin on the story, that they wanted to save future Jews from suffering, and therefore they were willing to go back to have another 190 years of slavery. These two ideas of looking at the story, which generally we look at as being a story which is tragic and filled with pain and filled with so many years of suffering, really teaches us that even the greatest commentaries sometimes look at things b'tov ayin, was a positive eye. And I think when we're in semi-lockdown now and so many weeks we've been together and with families and people living at the same time at home, it sometimes can create situations where we don't look necessarily positively at them, at the world around us, at our communities, at things around us. What these two ideas teach us, and what the Maharal of Prague teaches us with this deep insight, more than the insight itself, I think, is the idea that we need to try and develop a positive eye, to look at the world, to look at our community, to look at people, and to try and only see the good. This is something which is really close to our hearts because Tisha B'Av happened, because there was Sinat Chinam, baseless hatred. It can only happen when we have Ahavat Chinam, that Mashiach would be able to come and get rid of Tisha B'Av, where we love every single Jew and love people because we see the goodness inside them. If the great authorities can actually look at such a terrible story and find positivity within, it behooves us to look at the world around us, look at the people around us, and try to find positive goodness in everything that we see. Shabbat Shalom.